fellow housing people.
Yes. Well, we have our housing person right here. We are visited this afternoon by, I guess, all members of pretty much. There are 15 representatives here, Housing Authority, 15 housing authorities from across the Cape. So maybe you should all introduce yourselves to us so that we can see which town you're from, and then I know that there was concern, and I just want to know, who is Sandy? Hi,
That would be
Sandy.
me.
Okay, hi. I had your number to call because someone had called me about one of your meetings and a discussion that was going on, so that now that everybody's here, we can all discuss it together. But, okay.
A good idea for us to all
start in the front row.
Yes, why don't we start in the front row with the big introductions, and then we'll...
Okay, I'm Barbara Thurston, Director of the Bourne Housing Authority. Valerie Foster, Director of Chatham and Harwich Housing Authority. And Leila Oxford, Director of Mashpee Housing Authority.
Tom Lindsay, Falmouth Housing Director.
Tim Bueller, the Orleans Housing Director and Manager for the East End Housing Authority.
Ed Blackman, Chair of the Yarmouth Housing Authority.
Paula
Schnepp, the Director of the Sandwich Housing Authority and the Commissioner at Barnstable Housing Authority.
Nancy Friend, Director of Dennis Housing Authority.
Patrick Manning, Director of Provincetown Housing Authority.
Sandy Perry, Director of Barnstable Housing Authority.
I'm Patricia Grace. I actually work with all these folks in my capacity as a lawyer, but I'm only here not to represent them today, but just on notification
to
day.
listen. Okay.
Jacqueline
Fun thing to do on your vacation.
Yeah.
Jacqueline Crushane, Brewster Housing Authority Director.
Okay, great. Does anybody want to fill these two seats up here, or has anyone...
Well, actually, and there's also two others that will
be coming? Okay. Who would like to start? Would you like to start, or would you like...
So why are you here?
I can start. I wrote up a brief statement just to sort of explain why we all show up
right
in the door. And thank you for responding to our request to meet. Because we're here to in an attempt to bring continuity and clarity to the discussion sort of swirling around the topic of regionalization. First and foremost, we're concerned because while these discussions are happening and studies are being planned, not one of us has been contacted to be part of the process. And so, as a result, we've sort of been forced to rely on second and third hand information. And as a group, we meet regularly to share information, ideas, and best practices, but lately we've been sort of forced to discuss regionalization based on just these snippets of information. And we decided much better communication is warranted on the topic, and most importantly, we want to stress the importance of our inclusion in the process. It's easy to hear the word regionalization and just kind of assume that bigger is better, but I think the expense of the loss of local control and local relationships could prove to be a serious impediment to the creation and support of local affordable housing. So these are just sort of the basic facts as I know them. Like I said, we're really trying to fill in a lot of gaps in communication. So it's our understanding that an RFP is in process of being written to study the prospect of some type of regionalization of services within the 8 lower and outer Cape towns. And we're unclear as to whether the scope covers many services or whether this RFP is only going to cover housing authorities. But regardless, it seems logical to include some housing authority directors in drafting the RFP because we're concerned that there's misconceptions about housing authority funding, current cooperative management agreements between some housing authorities, and as well as the cooperative nature in which we already operate. So we're here to sort of be brought up to date on what has taken place, and then hopefully, say our desire to be included in the process going forward.
This is, I think, from misunderstandings, we might go forward in a way that we didn't even plan. So this is a good thing. Do you think we get a hold of Elizabeth Hughes? Isn't she the special projects person over at
Paul
Cape?
Lushinskas is the one that is supposed to be driving this because he was the one over the commission who was responsible for the coordination of the housing consortium.
But this is, I think this is stemming from something different. I think this stems from the request for the grant money to take a look at how housing could be regionalized, authorities could be regionalized. Who is from Eastham again? You are. Sheila Vanderhoe is the one who put in that application. Now, are you aware of the application and what it involves? And
I only became aware that there was an application last week at a meeting with her, and it was only coincidentally that she was there for another purpose. So there hasn't been to this date anything other than, we're looking at regionalization.
Okay. That's about as much as I know, quite frankly, and I think that the three of us know. So let me back up and let you know how this came about. We had monies, over the budget period, we were trying to put money in our budget to have what was called an Office of Regional Coordination. And that idea stemmed from a grant process that is done annually from the state, and it's done as a pass-through to the Cape Cod Commission, only because the Cape Cod Commission is our regional planning agency. And they are given the task of putting out RFPs to the towns, usually to expedite permitting processes. The state, because all of everyone's resources and funds are diminished down to, as we all know, horrible amounts, encouraged and directed these grants this year to be given out in an RFP for towns if they had any ideas or avenues that they wanted to explore of regionalizing amongst themselves, what services they might want to look at. To look at these, to say you have an idea of what, a DPW you'd like to regionalize, maybe 2 towns could combine its resources and do purchasing, that sort of thing. As it turns out, the Lower Cape towns were looking at combining police departments, Orleans and Eastham, as you well know. This doesn't happen very easily, even though you say, oh, well, we could do that, and this is, once you start peeling off the layers of that onion, there's so many differences as far as how those are 2 separate police departments that have different regulations, different uniforms, different pay structures, the whole 9 yards. So it's worth the while to have an outside person come in and help you get through that information. It saves the town money. That's what this whole grant process was about, to save you that investment of time, money, and exploration to see does it work or not work. So this was the availability. We thought it was a great idea.
Who's we?
We as commissioners decided to match that grant fund in our budget and to title it the Office of Regional Coordination as just to have a title and a line item. There wasn't an office and there wasn't...
With respect, I think they're here to talk about whether or not they've included in the housing grant. And that's all over the Cape Cod Commission. And as far as I know, we were never given any paper at all as far as what they were doing.
Exactly. We were not given that. But there was a request from the town of Eastham to explore regionalizing housing authorities on the Lower Cape. And I think that stems from, in the Lower Cape, some of the housing authorities lack some members. There's not as much manpower, so it might make sense to combine a couple to go forward. This was all exploratory. We were waiting for the results of this study once it came out and to see, what was learned, what wasn't learned, and then it was going to be a body of knowledge that we would keep here at the county, so that if there were other towns, now Eastham and what other towns might be looking at this, might say, there are some aspects that are good, some aren't worth it, whatever the outcomes are, then that is now some intellectual property that other towns, if you choose to discuss this issue, can access. So that was the benefit. That was the only thing we asked for was some of that intellectual property. Now, I did get a call, a couple of calls. I think you had a meeting where you were discussing this, and it did seem like, the county is now going to push regionalizing housing authorities, and that has never really been discussed here.
Well, okay.
Although Mr. Doherty does have some strong feelings on the subject.
And the problem I'm having with this discussion right now is that the study that was going over the Cape Cod Commission was the typical study that they run, which is they go out and they do a survey, they find out what the assets and resources are out there. I have very strong opinions about combining the administrative workload. In the case of Falmouth, for example, Bob Murray was not an administrative whiz, but an entrepreneur. And that's in the capacity that he built in housing in Falmouth, reflects that. We haven't built any housing in Harwich until we combined with Chatham, where we were able to use staff from Chatham to take care of the paperwork that all small housing authorities have to do in order to move that forward. The issue for a lot of housing authorities is that they don't have the resources to get past taking care of the responsibility of doing the paperwork in order to move something forward and meet the requirements that DHCD places on it, because those requirements are the same whether you're Barnstable or whether you're Falmouth or whether you're Harwich. So part of the way of making progress on this, and I'm just speaking for myself
personal
now,
opinion.
okay, is that if the only time that we built housing in Harwich was when we were combined with another housing authority, and somebody did the paperwork and somebody did the entrepreneurial piece. And that, to me, is an experience that I've had, plus the observation of Barnstable added housing when Tom Lynch was acting as an entrepreneur, and somebody else was doing the paperwork over there. So housing authorities with large staff that had people who were leading it, that were adding housing were over there, both in Barnstable and for us. And who else are you working for?
I work for Falmouth.
Falmouth,
I
okay.
just contract with everybody else.
All right. She's acted as an agent for, let's say, for adding property over time. So I'm looking at this model, and again, I'm just speaking for myself because I've been very frustrated in housing. If anybody here does not have a waiting list, would you raise your hand? Okay, which at the end of the day is the whole point of my interest in trying to move this forward. I've been, unfortunately, don't have the level of success that 20 years of doing this I should have, so you can understand some of my frustration. So with this, please accept my apology.
There's your clarification. Okay, Pat.
I think when you hear the word regionalization, that word is a huge, big umbrella, and it means a whole lot of things. In some areas, it means consolidating into one. In another function, it may be sharing expertise, regionalizing expertise. If you have someone who has, in one housing authority, who has particular expertise in an area that maybe 3 or 4 other neighboring housing authorities might need, you can share that expertise. It might also mean collaboration in terms of the couple of towns that we just heard got together and collaborated on a housing project. It can mean that. It can mean almost anything you want it to mean because it has such a broad scope to the definition of the term regionalization. It doesn't mean taking all the housing authorities and creating one. I mean, we know that would never work.
A county.
And the county's position here is to be a resource to help that regionalization of whatever that may be to occur, whether it's through the Cape Cod Commission because they have some of the grant resources necessary that can help
and the technical
do that, the technical expertise to do it. But the county's role is to be a resource to those who want to learn how they can better and more efficiently operate their organizations and not necessarily consolidate them. So, I mean, that's where I'm coming from in terms of, and this is where the commissioners have been in trying to get, we attempted to get $150,000 to create the office that Sheila was talking about, the Office of Regional Coordination.
The line item.
But with the idea that those monies would be available to agencies and organizations and towns that wanted to explore avenues of how they might be able to share resources. Like, for instance, a town has a sealer of weights and measures. You probably never even heard of those people before. But they go out and they look at gas tanks, okay, you know what they do. Well, you could have maybe 3 or 4 sealers for the whole Cape, and each town doesn't have to have their own. So it depends on what the function is as to whether or not it even makes sense to regionalize. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah. As far as a policy that we have stated that we would like to pursue regionalizing housing authorities and have the Barnstable County Housing Authority, that has never, actually, that's the first time it's probably crossed our lips, that whole saying.
It has crossed mine before.
It has crossed his, and I'm sure you're well aware of that. As far as wanting to help towns, I mean, regionalization, is the way I think that we've all looked at it, is trying to get more for less. I mean, our resources are going down, and our need is going up. And we all want, everybody in this room wants to be able to provide housing for those who do not have it. So that is your common goal. And if it's not being able to be done individually, I'm sure since you're here as an association, it seems, you must discuss what's working, what's not working in your towns, and that sort of thing. It may be a good step for all of you to say, where is it we could share things, and if there was anything you needed to help you pursue those studies, such as grant money to bring in a facilitator, an independent voice other than people who have a stake in the outcome, a personal town stake, then that's what we wanted to be able to have available, that type of money to be able to say to you, sure, go ahead and see what happens. You might come out and say, it's not going to. You already have some conclusions formed where there are benefits of having separate local housing authorities, but it may be a good time to take a look at where you can share and not dismantle your housing authorities, but what you can do to save money and get to the end game goal.
I have a question for the
Excuse me, Pat was just
one more point. It could also be, depending upon the location, sharing space or overhead. Mm-hmm. I mean, it may be that the housing authority in one town is 5 blocks from another town, and maybe sharing that space and overhead might make sense. I don't know, but that's another option. But that's entirely a local effort.
Is anybody here? I attended a Lower Cape regional task force study of looking at housing in the Provincetown, Truro, and Wellfleet area to decide whether or not it made sense to develop housing that would serve that lower region. And I remember we met several times. And is anybody here? Do you remember?
There was one meeting, and I wasn't able to attend that. That's the only meeting that I know of where the housing authorities did get together, which was Wellfleet, Truro, and Provincetown.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I don't know if you were there. No, if you were that one.
Was that Wellfleet?
Yeah.
I was there, yeah.
Tim was there.
We met, and after discussing what they have and don't have, they came to the conclusion that there's very little that we could do as a group.
Okay.
And I think that's probably also a very important key, is that as housing authorities, all of us individually do a lot of collaborating together and in cooperation of sharing resources and stuff. And that's why it's sort of like, if that's what the study's looking at, housing authorities are actually already doing that. And there was no tapping of a resource that already had some of this information. Was also an issue.
I was just going to suggest, for the sake of time, because we're going to get pressed up again at the assembly, that we just defer this discussion until Patty gets here.
Okay.
And because I have a couple of those. Oh, no,
Patty's here.
I withdraw my suggestion.
It would be. Have a seat, Patty. Patty Daly is with the Cape Cod Commission, and we have a title I know, but
Director of Technical Services.
Yes, and you are the person who did review some of these grant proposals and that sort of thing.
Yes.
But before you go into, everybody's here because they've heard that the county has given money for a study to do regional housing. And I think, like some stories go, somebody cuts their finger, and by the time the story gets around 10 times, it's a larger story.
That's really not the entire issue. What we heard is that a grant has been given, and yes, there are some, we're not exactly sure what the purpose of the grant is, which is why we're here. But our overriding concern was that there have been ongoing discussions and grants back to January, but yet no housing authority has been contacted.
I think that's a very good point. Before I give the floor to Patty, how did the conversation go with Sheila when it was brought up, and what information did you get from her about this?
She was there on another issue. We had invited her to the housing authority members had invited her just to talk about housing in general, and it's at that time that she then told the board last week that there was going to be a study. There's going to be a grant in the study on regionalization.
Okay, so Patty, why don't you take it from here and tell us about that proposed grant?
I'll start at the very beginning. We got awarded some money from the state, and that money is to be awarded to the towns. And the focus of this state technical assistance money was regionalization projects. This year, that was the focus. We received a letter from Sheila Vanderhoff from Eastham asking to fund a study that would look at regionalizing housing authority services. And this was a discussion that Sheila had with, I believe, the other Outer Cape towns as they were meeting on kind of municipal cooperation issues. This is one of the things that came up. So it's originally envisioned by Sheila. This involved Provincetown, Truro, Wellfleet, and Eastham, I believe, those 4 communities. We received the request, and we did write back that it was fundable. I think we offered $15,000, I believe, of money to do that. In the meantime, we've been having a discussion in-house about whether that should be the extent of the study, whether it should be more broad or more focused potentially. Paul Rachinskis from our office suggested that we include a study of, and let me get the language right, affordable rental housing property management services, because he felt that there could be some benefit in understanding how providing those services regionally could benefit the community. Paul also suggested that there might be more to be gained from looking at potential for regionalizing housing authority services if we looked at more than just 4 towns, that we might want to look at, say, 8 towns. So that suggestion has been made through me to Ms. Vanderhoff, and she's indicated that she didn't have a problem with that. So we're still in discussions with Eastham about all this. I know that Paul has contacted a lot of the property management folks, and I assume the housing authorities at this point. No? Okay.
No.
These are all housing authorities.
Right, so let me just
They're here because they're feeling left out.
We're going to add that to the list, I guess.
Yeah, I think that would be a very good thing.
Okay. So at this point, we have indicated to Eastham that this is a fundable project. We are still in discussions with Sheila about what the study should focus on, how big or small should it be, and what that scope of work might be that we ask the consultant to look at. So nothing's been spent, nothing's been determined finally. So we're in a good place to take input from you all, and I'd be happy to do that.
Right.
Well, I think in addition to input, I think it would make sense to have representation on the committee that is developing an RFP, going to be selecting a consultant, because the housing authorities are the principals involved in the study, and I think it makes sense to have representation, especially this weekend. And I think that's what we would like to ensure, since we are the ones that know best how we can share resources and try and save money. And we're obviously as concerned because, we are going to be having very tight fiscal times. And we're just surprised that, quite frankly, that no one had talked to us.
I absolutely agree. It makes sense to consult with the housing authorities that are involved.
Absolutely.
And if it's going to be expanded, and anyone who has an interest. Again, these are, yes.
Also, is the grant awarded to the town of Eastham, or as it was submitted, it was, I guess, submitted for the Intermunicipal Cooperative Committee, which is the Lower Cape Towns or Provincetown, Wellfleet, Truro, Eastham.
Right.
So is the grant for the town of Eastham, or is it for this intermunicipal cooperation? Because when I talked to the Board of Selectmen chair and the town manager of Provincetown, they did not know that the letter had been submitted, nor did they know that an award was going out. And their part, and the letter was, the application or the request was submitted on behalf of that group. So where is it going? Because that's going to have a difference of how the input also happens.
And again, that's why we're still in discussion and the money hasn't changed hands. The money would be awarded to the town of Eastham, the requester, for the purposes of studying whatever it is we all agree on the end of the day. And from talking with Sheila, it had been my understanding that this was a discussion they had through the Cooperative Agreement Committee, whatever their name is.
Yeah, the Municipal Committee of Municipal Cooperation.
Right, Intermunicipal Cooperation Committee.
Right.
Eastham, Wellfleet, Truro.
So the money would go to Eastham, to answer your question, but it would have to be, and the idea was that it would be expended on a consultant, and that we all would agree on the scope of work, and the consultant would do the work to benefit all of those communities.
Now, again, this is a study. It's not an implementation of that study. It's a gathering of information that can only really be of use in the end. But it would be more of use if it had the input of all the stakeholders involved.
Absolutely.
Right. So we'll make sure of that. But the Lower Cape towns with their this all came about, I think they're collaborating in the way they are, this inter-municipal cooperation stemmed from one of the police chiefs retiring, and it was Orleans and Eastham, correct? Am I right? Your Eastham retired, so they started to look at Orleans. Orleans was having, everybody's having tough times. And they then went to other areas, and what they found is that by making lots of purchases through the county, they immediately saw low-hanging fruit where it made a difference to get together and talk about these things, and where they could combine RFPs for different supplies. And there was nothing for them to draw on to even talk about police. They contacted people all over the state, and it had not been done. So it really was like a first-time study, and it was intense. So they kept saying, if we just had some money, because as you all know, boards of selectmen and all this are a lot of volunteer time. And so this was coming in as an objective voice. Pat, you had...
Well, maybe, Patty, you could help in maybe laying out what's the next step here. I mean, how is this going to take place, and when will it take place? Obviously, we've decided that input from the housing authorities is needed. And so how is that going to happen, and how will all of these people know?
The latest discussion that and let me just back up by saying that this money needs to be spent by December 31st of 2009. So we're on a pretty quick turnaround schedule at this point. The latest discussions that we've had were that we expand by 4 more communities beyond the original 4. And it was my job to start to make phone calls to those communities to see if the town administrators wanted to have their town involved.
Patty,
yes.
The housing authorities are an independently elected body.
I understand.
And if you're going to talk about housing, excuse me, I beg your pardon. If you're going to talk about housing in the community, the town administrator does not have direct responsibility or authority to deal with that housing authority. Distinction. Housing authorities are responsible for supporting low-income rental housing.
Yes.
Affordable housing is usually an advisory committee, at least within Harwich, and it's distinct and different from low-income rental housing. So it's a very important distinction.
Thank you. I understand that. So the next steps were going to be, I was going to contact town administrators. Paul Roshinskis was going to start contacting the housing authorities. And obviously we need to have a meeting, talk about scope, and make sure everybody's on the same page. If we can get there, or at least with the entities and the towns that we can reach agreement with, I'd suggest we move forward. Again, it's just a study. It's not going to implement anything, but it was trying to find opportunities to save money so we can put that money back into housing and create more. That was the purpose.
And we appreciate that. However, I think the issue here is the communication or the lack of communication, which has us a bit upset because we meet monthly and we'd be happy to be available to Paul if Paul wants to come and meet with us and get our input. It's just talking about housing authorities and regionalization in a roundabout way without including the stakeholders. You can understand that has us a bit concerned.
I do.
So that's why we're here. And Patty, I know that you're familiar with housing authorities and how they operate from your days in Barnstable. And I just would hope that...
I learn more every day.
Well, we do too. So,
but yeah, nothing's been determined at this point.
Okay, now Mark?
I just want to say, and I don't disagree with anything that you folks have said, and I agree with it completely, and we certainly, from our end, will take care of that. But I have to feel, and be frank, that to some extent, maybe we made an assumption that a local housing authority and its own town community would be communicating as to what the town is requesting. So, we certainly will take some mea culpas here for a lack of communication. Absolutely. But I might suggest the next group that you visit individually, perhaps, is your own selectman or town administrator, and say, hey, you should call me too. And so that's how I feel.
Okay.
Certainly, the selectman in Howard certainly are aware of my presence and the interest of the Howard Housing Authority, and I can't imagine that would not happen if you contact the administrator and the selectman in Howard. They would immediately contact us.
Okay. Yes.
I think that one of the things that you may be missing is that the goals of a local housing authority and the goals of the town administrator are not always in sync. Mm-hmm. And that the town administrators have their own issues and their own agendas, which and as housing authorities try to move forward, it is sometimes as much negotiation internally in the town as it is if you were trying to say match up Provincetown, East End housing authorities with not talking to anybody. And there is so much possibility for additional confusion by going the route you're talking about that I think that it is a bad choice. As politically a bad choice.
I agree, and I will just piggyback on with Mark. I think our assumption was that I was aware that grant proposal came forward from Eastham. I did know that Sheila made that proposal. I did talk to a couple of people who have always been involved in the subject from Eastham, and they didn't know, and they said, how come she didn't tell me about this? Not that she's on your housing authority, I don't believe, but you know who I'm talking about. I'm going to say it. And so she was concerned. She says, I'm going to speak to Sheila about that. And we just assumed that it was going for. I was waiting for what was going to be the outcome, because we assumed, which we all know was a bad thing, and we apologize for that. That those lines of communication were being carried out so that everybody was aware of what was happening. I only have a question, and I would think that if such a study with your input was carried out and it had different results that were beneficial, I mean, it helped you weed out and where you sort of already knew wasn't going to work, but it might have shed a new light on something that you really didn't look at it in a certain way and said, well, that does work, that would only be beneficial for all of you to go through, right? So, and you'd be more than happy to have that information. Yes, please.
The $50,000 was that the amount that was awarded by the state to the commission, or is that just a portion of the money?
That was just a portion of the money.
Do you know how much the state awarded?
It was
$155,800.
Yeah.
And that's just for regionalization.
That was for studies of regionalization.
Well, I think it's called local technical assistance grants. This year, if I'm not mistaken, Patty, this is the first time it's been eligible to be able to be used to assess kind of regionalization issues.
Right.
Right, that's right. And they actually had a goal, I forget if it was 20 or 30%, that they asked be spent on those efforts.
Could I ask a question?
If somebody else would like to, we can just do that. Yes, because we have to get
I just-
wrapped up.
Patty, did you do any cost benefit or a benefit analysis of what you're going to hope to accomplish at the end? Because housing authorities are not funded by towns, they're not funded by the county. Some of them aren't funded by the state, they're all funded internally. So I'm wondering, with the housing authorities discussing among themselves and not just discussing, collaborating amongst themselves, where's the benefit?
I think that's part of the reason why we added this other task that wasn't originally requested, which is the housing property management services.
And I want to say something about that.
Okay.
I consult with Petch, and no one called Petch at all, which is one on the list. And according to CDP, no one had called them either. So.
Okay. All right, well, we'll make sure that...
They shouldn't be included. That's how the nonprofits make their money. So I don't think they would outsource their rental management.
Okay. I understand. All right. I do understand that housing authorities aren't funded through the town. They're through the state, is my understanding.
State or federal government.
State or federal, okay. So I think, again, in talking with Paul about it, and I think this is one of the reasons why this one has taken so long to kind of come to fruition is, we've talked about the benefits of cost savings to allow that money to be plowed back into the program to support more housing, basically. But no, I didn't do a cost-benefit analysis. I think we assumed that if there were savings to be found, that the study would find them. But we're happy to have that conversation.
Okay, I can only take a couple more questions because we have to get over to the assembly.
To make for those housing authorities that receive subsidy from the state and federal government, we're not going to, if you realize the savings, it simply reduces your subsidy. That money doesn't get to be spent elsewhere.
Well, these are all, this is all good information.